So I'm going to post that in the next couple days on our site. If you guys are interested in helping support, I'm going to post that, so look for that. And then I'm going to stop babbling. I'll talk for a few more minutes after Patty. So I'm going to introduce Patty. She is the producer of The Moth Detroit, along with many other amazing things, and I'm going to turn it over to her to talk about our theme this month of chaos. Please give Patty a warm.
Good morning, everybody. How are you?
Good.
Thanks, Anne-Marie, for having me here at Creative Mornings, and thanks to Kyle and Alex for having us here at Floyd and Drifter, and all of you beautiful people for coming out so bright early on a Friday. So I was reminded of something that I do at the beginning of workshops that I lead by my friend Kat here, that I think would be a great way to start today. So everybody please stand up. We're going to do some stretching. So arm above your head, pull it the other direction, whichever way is great. Breathe while we're doing this. All right, switch to the other side. Do some breathing with this too. Go across. Keep that breathing going. The other way. Awesome, and now we're going to do neck rolls. So be very careful with this. If you have any sort of neck or back injury, feel free to not participate. But just look down, roll to the right, slowly. When you get back to start, go to the left. One more time, the other way. Go back. All right. And some weirdness called vocal warm-ups. Does anyone have any experience with performing live? Any theater kids here? Yeah. Just oh, there we go. Good. So we're weirdos, and we do a lot of weird shit, including vocal warm-ups. So if everybody just wants to massage your jaw, open it, get in those muscles, close, rub all around, make tight O's with big O's with your lips. Feels weird, right? It's awesome. And everybody go, ah, 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 ah. Perfect. We're warmed up. Thank you. All right. So as Anne-Marie mentioned, I am the Michigan producer of The Moth, and that is one of many hats that I wear. I also am a storyteller and a writer, and I lead workshops for different kinds of organizations on applied storytelling. So today we're going to talk about chaos and creativity from two different angles. I want to talk about first the scientific side of chaos and creativity, so how our brains, the brains of creative people, make sense of chaos, how they work, and how other people's work too. And then we're going to talk about the practical, everyday side of managing the chaos that we all have in our lives and how we can harness that to help our creativity. So we're going to start with the science side of things. So a little bit about where I come from. I grew up in rural Michigan as an athlete, which was a role that I was pigeonholed in from a very young age, because when you grow up in a small town, it's really hard to change. But I knew that I really wanted to be involved in creative things. I couldn't find a way to do that. So when I was 16, we moved to the suburbs, and at that point I decided to use the opportunity to jump in with both feet. And so I joined the theater, I founded a literary magazine, I started I learned what creative nonfiction was, which wasn't called that in the 90s, but I started writing essays, and by the end of high school, I was the vice president of our Thespian Society, which is like the vice captain of the nerds, and it was awesome. I then went on to study theater and writing at Michigan State and later got a master's degree in storytelling, so it's safe to say that I'm a firmly right-brained person. But like I mentioned earlier, I do lead a lot of workshops on applied storytelling for organizations, and oftentimes I'm working primarily with very left-brained people. So engineers, mathematicians, folks who are looking to add more of how we as creatives behave to their work life. And so through that, I've learned a little bit about how the brains of people that are less creative work, kind of. But still in my research for this, it took a lot of weeding through the and dissecting to figure out exactly what the scientists were talking about because of my right brain nature. But what I learned was this. So psychologist and father of the remote associates test of creativity, Sarnoff Mendick, defined the process of creative thinking as the forming of associative elements into new combinations which either meet specific requirements or are in some way useful. The more mutually remote the elements of the new combination, the more creative the process or solution. What does that mean, right? Has anybody heard about the remote associates test before or taken it? No, I hadn't either. So what that test does is that it gives you three seemingly unrelated words like fish, mine, and rush, and then you have to come up with a word that connects them. In this case, the most obvious one is gold. And so what Mednick found in his studies was that creative thinkers find associations that are more distant to the three set of words. The word that connects them isn't the most obvious one, and less creative thinkers find associations that are more straightforward. So the first thing that comes to the mind of a creative person is different than the first thing that comes to the mind of a less creative person, and the creative thinkers are making connections that don't seem obvious. So obviously there is some connection there between that study and higher IQs, but we won't talk about that today. But what these findings have done is led other scientists to map those results of the RAT test and to make these really cool networks of associations based on Mednick's research that lead to the idea that creative people should have richer, better connected, and more flexible associative networks than less creative people. So what does that mean? That means that creative people can make connections to things that don't seem connected easier and more deeply, meaning that we see things in new ways, right? So what that means is that the brains of creative people, like our brains, without us knowing that this is happening, take chaos and make order out of it much easier than the brains of people that are less creative. Cool. That sounds exciting, right? Science is neat. Brains are awesome. I'm really glad I have one. And that I'm a creative thinker, but how, what happens inside. What about the spaces that we keep around us? I'm sure people here have heard lots of opinions about keeping your workspace tidy, or that mess adds to the creative process, and that the most creative people are the ones that are surrounded by the most chaos. Has anyone heard of this kind of general idea? Well, the psychological scientist Kathleen Voss tested volunteers to see if this was true. If living in a really messy space led to more creative output, and the short answer is yeah, it does. But she also tested another aspect, which was that She gave people living in either very messy or very tidy spaces both creative challenges and the opportunity to either take an apple or french fries, or donate or not donate to charity. And what they found was that people who live in tidier spaces make better decisions. So while it's pretty cool that living in a messy space leads to more creative outcomes, it can kind of also make you an asshole. So what I think is the most important thing to take away from this research is that balance is key, right? And what she concluded was that the balance of both chaos and order is necessary to have a real full creative life. And Dr. Robert Bilder said that the truly creative changes and the big shifts occur right at the edge of chaos. So what I learned from all of this is that the minds of creative people see chaos and make complex pathways through it, while the spaces in which creative people live need to have a balance of both chaos and order for us to have successful creative output and richer lives. So what is creativity anyway? Keeping on the science for a minute, according to the Semmel Institute of Neuroscience and Human Behavior, creativity is a mental and social process involving the generation of new ideas or concepts, or new associations of the creative mind between existing ideas and concepts. Creativity is fueled by the process of either conscious or unconscious insight. An alternative conception of creativeness is that it's simply the act of making something new, which I really like that. I really love the idea that creativity is the act of making something new. How about chaos? What is chaos? The Oxford English Dictionary defines chaos as complete disorder and confusion. And chaos can be an obstacle, but it doesn't have to be. So how do we take complete disorder and chaos and make something new? Knowing what we know now from scientists about how our brains work, what the best kind of environment to live in is. The duality of chaos and order is necessary for creativity to flourish. I really, when studying storytelling in grad school, I really got into the idea of the shadow self and the duality that we all have within us. And I think that the idea that our creative lives and managing chaos in them is a duality also is really speaks to my overall way I think about being a creative person. So creativity is controlled chaos, and taking a big old jumbled mess of this world that we have around us and making sense of it through art, I think is what all of us are trying to do at some point in some way with our creative lives. Who here has had, or currently has, probably both chaos in their lives? Me. Yes. Those of you who didn't raise your hand are lying. There have been periods in my life that have been way more chaotic than others. In 2005, I lived in Nashville, Tennessee with my fiance Paul, and I came home one day after work to find that he had taken his life in our house. And that was complete disorder. It was total confusion. My life turned from something that I thought had a path to complete and utter chaos. And to be completely frank, I let that chaos rule me for a while. I think that was okay. That was of the way I needed to react to it. And I leaned into the chaos almost too far. But then I had this amazing experience, and I found suicide loss survivor support groups, which I don't know if any of you have ever gone to any sort of support group, AA or grief support groups, but it's an amazing experience to be around people who've gone through something so similar to you, who speak a language that you didn't know anyone else knew, and to be there and feel like you're not alone. And when I entered that room for the first time in Nashville at a church, which I'm very speculative of in general, with people that were complete strangers when my whole world had exploded, I wasn't expecting to have what happened. But by the end of that first hour, I could see things a little bit more clearly, because I was giving dedicated time and space to this chaotic thing. I was taking the grief and my loss, and instead of allowing it to rule my entire life, I was giving it a box to be in. And I didn't try to make it go away, but I did try to control it. And over the months of attending that group, I started to be able to see my creative self again, because I was allowing the chaos to still live, but to be a little bit more refined. And so after a few months, I was able to start throwing events again. I put on this really ridiculous and fun multimedia event in this old abandoned vinyl pressing plant. And I did that again and again until I moved to LA. And then I moved to New York, and I kept working creatively and feeling more and more confident in what I was doing. But all the while, I kept going to suicide loss survivor support groups. I always made sure that I, every month, sometimes more, had the opportunity to talk about this thing that had completely upended me in a really specific way. And I think that that's what saved me. That's what allowed me to keep going and to continue now, almost 13 years later, to live a creative life and be a creative person without having the chaos take over. So I'd like to hear some examples of chaos in your life. Who has, and this does not, I know I just talked about suicide and being a widow and things that are really huge. Chaos does not always have to be like that. Chaos happens in very small ways too. Can I get an example of some chaos that's happening to someone right now? Yeah.
I have 2 kids.
Yeah. You can just stop right there. That is exactly perfect. Yeah.
They're both under the age of 5. Like one oldest just turned 3, so they're a little intense.
Yeah, that sounds like it would be complete chaos all the time. Do you have any techniques that you use to manage the chaos?
Routines, I think, are really important, because then they always know what's coming, and we can say, we do this every day, we put our shoes on, and, you know,
Routines is exactly where we're going with this.
Oh.
So good, great.
Good.
How about someone else? Yeah.
I have a 92-year-old roommate who's my mother, who's a teenager.
A 92-year-old roommate who is your mom, who is like a teenager.
And we just relocated last March, living in Chicago to Detroit. So the routine that we have is different. It's not,
You don't have a routine, yeah. So things are different all the time. The disorder, the confusion, it's there, right? It's prevalent. Those are great examples. How about creative ambition? Who in this room considers themselves a creative person?
Everyone raise your hand.
That's why you're here, right? I know that I have both small and long-term big goals for my creative life. I'd like to hear some creative ambition from you guys. What are some projects or some little things, some big things that some people are looking to work toward? We won't tell anyone.
Maddie, I got one.
Yes, Laura.
Yeah, I'm working on taking my funny Instagram stories and building that out into more like a YouTube channel.
That's great. If you don't already follow Laura's really funny Instagram stories, you should. They're really great.
Yeah.
Some badass.
Laura's is also a past speaker for Creative Mornings.
Yeah.
She's doing big stuff with that in general. So.
She's a dreamboat. And what's your first
Yes,
step?
I am a dreamboat. Thank you.
So open it Tinder, she'll be there. No, we'll see. What are some steps what's your next step?
My next step is to just put one video online.
There you go.
Just one little thing.
Small, yes,
Very small.
manageable, easy. Perfect, thank you, Laura. So I want to connect these two things, the chaos in our life and our creative ambition, our creative goals. And as Jessica mentioned, routine is absolutely necessary in controlling chaos. I'm not talking about this kind of control necessarily, though I think this is a pretty chaotic thing until it looks like this, right? The idea of a whiteboard and sticky notes and this left brain version of right brain thinking is really interesting, but routine is important. So I have a project that I would like everybody here to undertake. And this is going to last for 3 months. So do not worry about starting right now. But what I want everybody to do is to write 2 lists. And I mean physically write these down with a pen on a piece of paper. Not on your nice Apple devices or with your little pens that write on things that are electronic. I want ink on paper. And these 2 lists will each have 3 items, and I want to see 3 creative goals. And if there's only one thing that you remember from today, remember this. Setting goals and writing them down is the most important thing that we can do in our lives in general and specifically in our creative lives. Set specific goals. Not general goals, specific goals. It can still be a huge goal, but specific. 3 of those. List 2 are 3 pieces of chaos in your life. And again, these are things that are keeping you from reaching those goals that you set. And those can be things like as broad as I have 2 kids that are 3 and under. That's huge. And that can be broken down into a million months of this exercise in and of itself. But 3 specific pieces of chaos that are keeping you from what it is that you want to do. And again, chaos is complete disorder and confusion. And here's what I want to have happen with this. So, on the first week, I want everyone to take the first creative goal that they've written down. For me, I'm going to go with my big one, which is publish a book of essays. It's a really good goal to write down. It's also terrifying and huge, and everything stands to make me fail if I let it. But I'm not going to let it. I want to complete that goal. And I want everyone to spend, for that first week, just 10 minutes every day focusing on that goal. So that could be, for Laura, 10 minutes of looking through her stories that she's posted. Just looking through them is devoted time. That's good enough. 10 dedicated minutes every day for a week spent working toward this creative goal, no matter how small that is. And then take that first thing on your chaos list. For me, the chaos is this stupid piece of shit. Sorry that I have to keep saying swear words this early in the morning. I don't know how we feel about that. My phone. So social media is total chaos. I know a lot of us rely on social media for our careers, and in that way I love you, Instagram. Thank you for existing, but it's really important to get control over these things. And what I find that I do is that I say, okay, it's 9:45, I'm gonna go to bed, I'm gonna read. I have a stack of 8 books on my bedside table, and I get into bed, I plug my phone in thinking I'm gonna put it down, and an hour and a half later, I haven't even yet reached the end of Laura's Instagram stories because I got sucked into 100 million other things, none of which need my attention at that moment. So what I want you to do is, with that first item on your chaos list, figure it out, identify it specifically, and then spend 60 minutes. I know that sounds like a lot, but it's not, if this thing is getting in the way. 60 minutes only every day devoted to that chaotic block. And then at the end of that week, reflect on how those 10 minutes every day focusing on your creative goal make you feel. And focus how 60 minutes spent with that chaotic thing affects you. And write this down again on these pieces of paper that you're going to use. How did spending that time with each of those things make you feel, and how do those things relate to each other? Week 2, 20 minutes every day on that creative goal, and only 40 minutes on the chaos. At the end of that week, write them down. How do you feel? How was that 20 minutes every day? Some days might suck. They might be you thinking, sitting in a chair, thinking about it, and not doing anything other than that. And that's okay. You spent the time there. How did it feel to cut 20 whole minutes off of Instagram swiping? Or whatever it might be for you. Or carving out space for yourself when you have kids. How did those things relate to each other? Week 3, 40 minutes every day on your creative goal. 40. And only 20 minutes of concentrated time on that chaos. And again, write it down at the end of the week. How do each of those make you feel? How do they relate to each other? Final week of the month, week 4, 60 whole minutes every single day devoted to that creative goal. So we've worked up from 10 to 20 to 40, now we're at 60. And only 10 minutes every day allowing that chaotic element in. We started with 60, went to 40, down to 20, now we're at 10. And at the end of that final 4th week, that creative element should be totally under control. It should no longer be ruling you, you should be ruling it. And this creative goal, write down how much closer you are to it. Spending 60 minutes every day on something specific, dedicated, intentional time is a really huge accomplishment in itself. So where are you now? What are your next steps with those goals? And I want you to notice how it feels to switch your focus from the chaotic to the creative. And after you're done with that month, move on to the next thing on the list. Remember, we only put 3 things on there. We're starting small, we're taking it easy, we're not rushing. What's that next thing on that? What's your next creative goal? This can be totally different, or it can be related to the first one. What is another bit of chaos? And start again. Move through that list. And at the end of those 3 months, survey where you are. How do you feel? Check in with yourself and notice how your creative energy is working through your body now. Can you see more clearly through the chaos that was once all that was there? And I want to make perfectly clear that the goal is not to eliminate chaos. The goal is to set intention and to make the chaos of our lives work for us, to help us live more rewarding, creative lives where we're able to meet our goals. And chaos is never going to go away. It shouldn't. And hopefully we don't encounter too many of these giant, huge, upsetting, chaotic things in our lives. But just by following this plan, we will have the tools that we need to better handle chaos when it arrives. And remember what Builder said, the truly creative changes and the big shifts occur right at the edge of chaos. Being at that edge sounds pretty good, I think. So by developing habits that allow us to focus the chaos in our lives toward helping us reach our creative goals, we are honoring the beginning of each of these little universes that we're hoping to create. Whether that's an essay, or a song, or a painting, or a new couch. Every bit of intention, every habit we set leads us there. And I think it's important to recognize that what that means is that we're acknowledging the beauty in all of the chaos. So we're doing what science tells us we already do. We're bringing ideas together through paths that are complex and thoughtful, through our lives that are the same. Thanks, guys. Thanks to Patrick for the calligraphy too. These are amazing. You didn't get one. Tough luck.
Speaking of that, Patrick, I do have a class coming up.
Yeah, I have a class next Saturday, the 29th at Post. I have little flyers if you're interested, and you can still get a name tag for the rest of the day.
Yeah, I'm going to. We do have a few more minutes for questions, so if you guys want to Q&A, and then you're going to have to listen to me again.
Don't feel weird if you don't have any questions. It's okay. Yeah,
Do you still do this list routine?
I do. Yeah.
Really?
And I find that sometimes some months it's super hard, and other months it's not at all. And I think that has to do with a lot of different things. Whether it has to do with how well thought out my goals are, how specific they are, and also how much other stuff is happening in my life. It can be really easy to let the day-to-day, even the thing that we're not focusing on, just totally overrun. So some months it's really easy, some months it's super hard. And I don't spend like 18 hours a day on all the goals stepped up, but I'm always keeping in mind the goals that I've been working on when I'm on the next one. Yeah.
Who encouraged you to start that routine?
You know, this is going to be super new agey and weird, but I read The Artist's Way back in college, and when does anyone know The Artist's Way? Yeah, so morning pages are a thing that I really wish that I was better at, but I'm not that good at it. Because the idea of set time is hard for me. And I think it can be hard for other people too. Like doing things every day is super important, but doing it at a certain time is hard. So I wanted to take the idea of morning pages and transition it into something that worked better for the way that I live. And so it's through that, and also through meditation. I found that after another period of extreme chaos, I couldn't even read a page of a book without my mind going to really different places. And that was super frustrating, and it led to a lot of difficulty creating my own work. And so I was fortunate enough to find insight meditation at that same time, and I started Vipassana, which is a great way to set intention and to learn about the importance of even setting aside 5 minutes to focus. You're welcome, thank you.
If you're working on large goals that can't take place in 1 month, or large chaos that can't take place in 1 month, at the end of the month, do you reset and then spend 60 minutes on chaos, 10 minutes on the goal?
Yeah.
And go through the whole process again?
Yeah, because I think even if you're working on a giant project, what the way that I have found to best manage that is to break it apart into steps or into things. And if there's a huge chaos, what's one element of it that you're going to focus on? So being really specific, and that's a great question, being really specific with both of those things, even if we're talking about something huge, like publishing a book of essays is enormous. So for this particular exercise, I'm focusing simply on sitting in front of my computer and typing for 10 minutes, 20, working up to that. And then the next month, maybe it's working on editing certain things. The next month might be try to figure out how to get an agent, things like that. So whatever the big goal is, if you have a big goal, figuring out what small goals are along the way. I think with anything, breaking it apart into small, manageable chunks is always going to lead to better outcomes. And with the chaos, too. I mean, you can't get rid of your kid. And trying to figure out how to make a 2-year-old, not be a 2-year-old isn't going to happen. So figuring out tiny things there that you can control. And that's hard. I mean, coming up with these lists is hard. Defining them and refining them is hard, for sure. But even just that act will help make the path clearer.
Is there anywhere online where we can read some of your essays?
Well, sure. Some of them, mostly you can find me performing. If you go to my website, patriciarwheeler.com, I have cards here too. You can find access to everything that I have. Yep.
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you, Patricia. I'm an improviser at this. So thank you again to Patty for being our wonderful speaker today. Thank you to Floyd for hosting us. Thank you to Drifter for the coffee. I run on coffee, thank you. So please let's give them. I have 2 new volunteers this month, Norman and Heidi. So thank you for joining our team. Shout out about events you heard from Patrick who has his class coming up. Also, Post, as he mentioned, they were a previous speaker of Mutual Adoration. They have an event tonight at Post. It's an open house, so part of the Detroit Month of Design. So check them out, show them some love and support. Our friends MoGraph Mondays, they have this Monday at Gunner Animation. They're fantastic, wonderful people, so please check them out. They do amazing cool things, so follow them. Does anyone else have something like they want to celebrate or shout out or need support on? So speaking of chaos, I'm online dating. It's our date this weekend, so. Goodbye.
Kat over here has a book that is coming out. Did come out? October 5th. I had the honor of getting to read last night with her at Third Man. But check out Kat Gardner with an I and Little Wonder. It's a dreamy book. So celebrate her and publishing the first book.
Since we're shamelessly self-promoting.
Still single.
Still single, but that's not what I'm here to talk to you about. I am speaking at Zing Train on October 17th. If anyone is interested in developing the habit of courage, that is the topic and the focus of my talk. It's also what I spoke about at Creative Mornings in March. And I hope that you can join me, and please find me if you have any questions. Thank you. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you so much.
much for the talk, Patricia. That was incredible, really engaging, loved it. So this week we launched like the Floyd sofa, which is in the adjacent room, and no one's ever really seen it in person. And we would love if any brave volunteers would love to give like a testimonial for Instagram stories. You can be like, hey, actually I wish there was a recliner installed in the sofa and I'm not a fan of it. So you can be completely honest. But yeah, anyone brave enough to come and participate in that afterwards would love that. Thank you.